So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our last episode in our HS2 series, which have been absolutely fantastic. So we've saved the best to last. We have joint venture FH Care for overall BAM, EKFB, where we're going to hear from different areas of the business and, more excitingly, some of our very own that we've placed with the business. So sit back, enjoy. I'm going to hand over to the CEO. Over to you, Angela.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our virtual career chat. It is a great pleasure to welcome you back at the height of some record-breaking temperatures throughout the whole of the UK. So whether you're hiding from the sun in the coolest room in the house or you've invested in a fan, I hope you are sitting comfortable in your summer attire with some ice water in hand. Now, as part of our HS2 appointment, we have a timetable of these virtual career chats, as Caroline has said, and we're delighted to be chatting to EKFB this morning, our longest running and most supportive partner, with some of the most incredible veterans in their team, and they are a gold star for military employment and support. So this JV and this incredible company is made up of 4 leading civil engineering and construction companies. We have Eiffage, Kier, Ferrovial Construction and BAM Nuttall. Now, the civil engineering works across their 80-kilometre section kicks off at the Chiltern Tunnel and has everything that would impress engineers and builders the world over. We have viaducts, green tunnels, road diversions, a staggering 81 bridges and around 30 million cubic metres of excavation which was required to progress their works. So this is where engineering, logistics and construction meet at its very best. So here to impress you even further are members of their team. We will hear from 5 speakers this morning. We have their Delivery Director, Andy Swift, Skills Employment and Education Manager, Paddy Patterson, Senior Security Manager and Veteran, James Dobson, Senior Logistics Manager and Veteran, Paul Bedford, and Logistics Manager and Veteran, Dewey Duplessis. So I am delighted to pass to Andy to kick us off this morning, and we'll switch our cameras off, Andy.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Angela, for that very inviting welcome. All right, she obviously knows quite a bit about the project already. So yeah, my name is Andy Swift. I'm the Delivery Director for EKFB. So basically, what is my role? My role from a delivery perspective is to build what we've designed over the past 3 years. All right? And we're starting this year in earnest on site, delivering some of the work. So it's an exciting project to be part of, and it's an exciting project to deliver. And clearly, health and safety is part of that and paramount to our values and our core business and choices that we make. All right. So from my perspective, I'll just give you a bit of my background. Okay, from a career perspective, I've worked on HS2 now for around about 3 years. I started off in the construction industry right at school leaving age. Really, the construction industry was always one of my passions, all right, and I've managed to work during my sort of 25 years in the civil engineering career, working on some fairly large UK projects. Again, traditional really way of getting into the industry through engineering subjects at school, and then going through a degree, and then joining a series of companies throughout my life. Very much multidisciplinary, very much civil engineering. But again, from a career perspective, and certainly from a military background as well, that's some of the people are going to speak later. I've worked with a lot of these people during the course of my career and some of the bigger projects, and they've added massive value to some of these projects, not only the current one in terms of HS2. So it's a fantastic career to be involved with, and the sort of the traditional ways of working now in terms of the construction and the muck and the concrete, etc. It's so much more diverse in terms of the career opportunity we have, and I'll perhaps go through a couple of the career opportunities that will be available in a few minutes. So who is Eiffage EKFB? So it's made up of 4 major civil engineering and building construction companies, Kier and BAM in particular, probably more UK based and more UK known. And they've done a lot of multidisciplinary projects such as highways, railways, airports, schools, prisons, and hospitals. You know, a multitude of disciplines, and they're very much familiar with the projects like Crossrail and Hinckley. Right. Ferrovial, as the name suggests, is a Spanish in origins, but again, they've bought out a number of consultants and contracting companies within the UK, and are very much embedded into a lot of them disciplines I've just mentioned, but also has certainly worked with BAM and Ferrovial on the likes of Crossrail. Right. So that with them three are certainly very familiar with each other and work with each other for a long period of time. Eiffage is the sort of newcomer to the UK market, but very much in terms of the talent it brings to certainly EKFB, their experience in building high-speed railways. From one in particular is the latest one that was opened around about 4 years ago between Nantes and Paris. They designed, built, and they currently maintain that high-speed line in France. So they brought a lot of knowledge into the design elements of this, certainly in the early stages, and certainly now when we're doing the detailed design phases for the project. So again, we're bringing in a lot of talent from all over for Europe. And it's great to be talking to you today to try and encourage more and more of that talent back into this project, because the people are our strongest asset. Right? We need good people. We need providing enough training for them and development so that they can flourish in an environment that, certainly from a high-speed 2 perspective, this is only the first phase, and we've got also the second phase going forward. All right. So that's who we are. What do we do for HS2? All right. The background slide ultimately shows you the 80 kilometres that we're responsible for delivering, and that starts in the south near a place called Great Misselden in Wendover, and we start from the southern sort of portal there, and then we go north past Aylesbury, up through Calvert, up into Twyford and to Weston, and then end just south of Leamington Spa in a place called Southam, against another portal, tunnel portal. And so we're in between two other main works contractors, the one looking after the Birmingham in the north and the one through in the Chiltern tunnels in the south. As Andrew has mentioned, there's quite a few cubic meters of earthworks on this project. It's not just an earthworks project, but it is a predominantly a 3 seasons, so we've got 3 years of major earthworks to do. This being one of our first, so we're looking to do 5 million cube this year. All right, and then we've got another 2 to 3 years of earthworks. So hopefully this sunny weather certainly maintains for the rest of this summer, and certainly for the next one. All right. As Andrew mentioned, we've got a number of structures. So that the railway we're building goes over 15 viaducts along that 80-kilometre route, and as it cuts through the countryside, and we dissect through a lot of the A roads and the B roads, and therefore we need to create a number of bridges and underpasses, and that's where the 81 further overbridge structures come from in terms of maintaining and creating more diverse routes within the countryside of Buckinghamshire, Northamptonshire and Warwickshire. Again, in terms of the green tunnels, that's a design that allows the railway to be hidden, to be excavated into the ground. A precast tunnel is formed, and then we backfill over the top of it so that the environment is maintained, the communities benefit from less noise, less disruption. And there's around about 7 kilometres of green tunnel that we're actually creating across the job. So one of the biggest challenges we've got in our particular area is recruitment, and is getting the really good people to come and work for us. All right, we're in the heart of England, but there's clearly some tendencies from a Birmingham and London perspective for people to want to work maybe closer to them conurbations. All right? So we're trying to encourage people with the skills to come and work for us in a number of diverse opportunities. All right. And I think just touching on a couple of these career opportunities that we may potentially talk about over the next hour or so. So I think the civil engineering and design functions and the site managers and operations on site are certainly common to us, and we need more people to help us doing that. But I think there's also a lot more diverse careers now developing within the construction industry. Certainly a lot more when I started 25 years ago. So again, health and safety, the community, the quality side of things, and the environmental elements are, there's quite a number of people that we'll need in them particular disciplines. We're certainly doing a lot to encourage, to promote the environment when we're building. We've got a lot of ponds, we've got translocation of different habitats and creatures and animals, and we're planting a lot more trees, etc. So it is a vast element of environment we're putting back into the countryside, which promotes the existence of HS2. All right? In terms of stakeholder and community engagement, this is an area where perhaps HS2 and the concept of it is not well liked, but the intention is we're trying to encourage people by going out into the communities with our people and actually trying to demonstrate what we're actually putting back and changing some of the hearts and minds of the people within the communities, and also employing some of these people and employing some of the businesses to actually help us build this project and leave a really lasting legacy. Right? And that's developed quite a big team at the moment, and we've got more requirements in that area in particular. Right? Again, there's other things like accountancy and the commercial side of things, logistics and security, and you'll hear a number of people talking about that later on, but also other things like information management, the communications type and public relations, and even IT. Right? Well, again, we're trying to innovate here. We're trying to develop our systems. So IT is important, and I was talking to Caroline yesterday in regards to the use of the Xbox controllers and how they would in the future. Well, it's actually happening now. Able to control plant from your desk, or even from working from home. It's not exactly happening at the moment as of today, but I think in certainly 5 years' time, they're the sort of opportunities from a career perspective that the construction industry will encourage. I think also, I think there's a lot more from a site perspective in terms of career opportunities in drivers, HGVs, drivers, and plant operatives. Again, so I'd encourage people to look into them areas. We are partnering up with a lot of our supply chain partners in terms of our plant operators and other main works contractors. We're already establishing training schools along the trace, and the drivers of various different plants, of excavators and 60-ton dump trucks, and which you see on a lot of motorway projects. We're going to need circa 500-600 of these types of plant running up and down our job over the next 3 to 5 years. And drivers are scarce. So again, we're encouraging driver training and putting on training modules for all these people. So I think that wraps up a little bit and gives you a bit of an insight into the careers we're offering here. It's an exciting time at the moment for me from a delivery perspective. It's good to have some buckets in the ground and actually now starting work, having spent 2 to 3 years in the design phase. The designs now are coming off the paper and they're actually going into real life opportunities. All right? And that's where our recruitment comes in. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity of talking today. I look forward to listening to some of the other guys on the call to explain what they've done. Thank you.
Andy, that was fantastic. Thank you very much. And if I could ask your colleague Paddy to join us.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name's Paddy Patterson. I'm the Skills Education and Employment Manager at EKFB. I'm just going to cover off some of the priorities in terms of skills and employment that we have on the project, and also to kind of just bring you up to speed with where we are at the moment in terms of our recruitment and what we are looking at over the sort of next 6 months and beyond. Andy's covered a lot of it already, which is fantastic. So hopefully I can sort of build on and repeat what Andy's mentioned, and then we'll have an opportunity at the end to take any questions that you may have. So again, this has been covered by Andy and also Angela. So in terms of who EKFB are, and just to familiarise yourself with those logos, you'll see a lot of them if you're going to be sort of working with us in the future. In terms of scope, Andy had a really fantastic map in the background. This is kind of another representation of our trace, what we call the trace, and that's effectively our route. I think the thing to take away from that is that obviously we're really centrally located. So, you know, we are that bit between Birmingham and London. So in terms of geography, we're really central in the country. And so often when we talk about local really for us is quite a big chunk of England, really, if you think about that space. It's a lovely part of the country, very rural. An awful lot going on in terms of tourism. It's just a nice place to work. And I think one of the important points that Andy raised is about how this project is really trying to be sympathetic to the landscape. And so as well as getting a railway built, there's obviously a lot of responsibility we have around respecting the heritage of the area in which we're working. So that just kind of gives you a visual of our route, which also chimes with what Andy had in his background. Again, this has been covered a little bit as well in terms of the scope of the project. And again, it's just to give you that sort of visual representation of the scale of it. And again, even that doesn't really do it justice. It's only when you get down to site and you actually start to, you know, travel about a bit and you actually see the scope of what we're trying to do here. It's hard to get your head around it until you can actually see it. But there's an awful lot of work going on and an awful lot of opportunity, as again, Andy mentioned previously. So I'm going to jump straight into kind of skills and employment. So what are our priorities? Andy mentioned the word legacy in his talk, and HS2 as an overall project and as the client are very clear in their philosophy in terms of legacy. This isn't just about building a railway, it's actually about what else are we doing as well. And skills and employment is a massive priority for HS2 and in turn a considerable priority for us. That also means that, you know, we have a set of responsibilities as a tier 1 contractor, but in the work that we're doing with our partners, our tier 2 partners, so our subcontractors, then we're also working with them to make sure that they're equally committed in this space also. So local employment is a big thing for us, and we are working hard with a range of local partners to make sure that we're providing those opportunities at a local level. And again, if I just go back to the map that I showed up a minute ago, local for us, broadly speaking, you're probably looking at, you know, a huge radius around the Midlands between London and Birmingham. So while local employment is a big area, it's not just about, you know, 10 miles either side. Big priority for us is around the diversity of the workforce. I think anyone who's worked in engineering or in construction probably has some preconceptions about the profile of the workforce and how it's represented in terms of gender, ethnicity and disability. And so we have a huge equality, diversity and inclusion agenda. So a lot of the work we're doing, going back to the work we're doing with schools and colleges, with community organisations, working with organisations such as the Shaw Trust, with Buildforce, of course, and other organisations, is really trying to say that actually this is an industry that has opportunities for a wider range of people than you might imagine, because we have such a broad range of roles. We need to improve the diversity. We need to increase because we want the diversity of thought to be there. So actually people who are not necessarily traditional engineers or construction workers are exactly the people that we want to be engaging with. The industry's changing. So we've got a lot of work to do around digital skills and the use of technology. I think we mentioned sort of things like Xbox controllers and that type of tech. And again, we need to bring in new ways of thinking and new approaches. So again, people with those sorts of skill sets are particularly of interest to us. Leadership and management and supervision, again, those are really important areas, particularly in a project of this size, where, you know, we've got such a huge workforce, such a huge area of responsibility, health and safety, risk, all big areas. And so having kind of leadership and management people in place is massively important all across the business. And sustainability is another big area for us. So again, thinking about how as an industry we need to adapt, we need to be cleaner, we need to be more responsible. So again, bringing in that way of thinking, bringing in that skill set, particularly from other industries who have been slightly more forward thinking in that area, is a big priority for us as well. We're continuing to look at ways that we can be more responsible as an organisation, and that goes from again the materials and the waste of materials particularly. It goes down to some of our plant. It's particularly exciting for me that we have we have an increasing number of all electric plant. So again, when people think about machinery on a building site, they don't necessarily think about them being anything other than diesel powered machines. So the fact that we're now trying to encourage that type of approach is particularly important, I think, to discuss. We've got a big responsibility for how we support people into work. Now that could be people who are unemployed, and I've used the word displaced here. We all know over the past 12 to 18 months the pandemic has had a massive impact on a number of industries, and we as a large employer right in the heart of England have an opportunity, but I also think a responsibility to be working with agencies and individuals and organisations to illustrate that there are a range of opportunities within our project for people who might find themselves having to make career changes, career choices. So we have got and will have a lot of work going on in that area to connect with individuals and groups of individuals to sort of showcase what we have to offer at EKFB. One of the other important priorities for us with the workforce that we have in place is how we develop and progress that workforce. So looking at professional development, we have a number of colleagues who are working on things like chartership programs, additional qualifications. We're looking at programs such as apprenticeships, and again, apprenticeships not just being those entry-level type positions. We have people working on degree apprenticeship programs who are working towards undergraduate and postgraduate degrees in a range of things. So again, not just necessarily engineer-focused roles. And retraining is really important as well. As industry changes, the roles that people have change over time, and in some cases become a little bit less relevant in an ever-changing industry. So we're always looking at opportunities to retrain. We have a talent development and progression program. We're developing a training plan at the moment, which again is trying to look at how we can utilise the best in-house. So what can we do internally in terms of upskilling and retraining, but then where do we utilise qualifications and external training to get people in? And the other point Andy raised was about, in certain roles, things like drivers, plant operators. We've already been working with, I think we've trained over 500 people in driver training on plant machinery over the past 2 years. So again, we're working hard, continue looking for new opportunities to provide that training, both to people within the business already, but also equally people who are outside the business, perhaps looking to come in. And the expression I've put on here is something that we use a lot, and we talk about this a lot in schools, and we use the phrase that you don't have to be an engineer to work in engineering. So there's a whole host of people within the business, and myself included, I'm one of them. I'm not from a construction background at all. My background is in skills, education, policy, funding. I spent an awful lot of time working in apprenticeships. Dabbled a little bit in construction in terms of, I suppose, what we might call trades, house building, and was working in other roles. And so, for me, bringing those experiences into this role, hopefully is a benefit to the business, and also gives me an opportunity to learn about a whole new industry. So again, what we're trying to say is that, in all of our work, it's not just about what's going on, digging the holes on the site. There's a whole host of opportunities in the background and a whole host of roles that are all equally vital in terms of delivering a project of this nature. So in terms of what's happening at the moment, in terms of our recruitment and where some of those future opportunities may lie. So I suppose recruitment sort of sits in two areas. There's what's going on within EKFB as a joint venture, so our sort of core team, and then there's what's going on within the tier two, so our supply chain and also through our labour desk. So currently at the moment we have over 80 live vacancies across the trace, and again the trace is simply the word we use to describe our kind of patch, if you like, the route. So we have 80 live vacancies at the moment. They're all posted on our website. And again, there's a range of roles there. So again, there are engineering roles. There's things like surveying. There's finance roles. There's a couple of finance manager roles at the moment. There's requirement for things like traffic marshals and works managers. Again, a whole host of roles with a different range of experiences required. So again, we're really keen to promote those roles as far and wide as we can. We currently have over 800 people on the project working at EKFB, but I think there is still scope for a lot of what we would call white-collar recruitment during the rest of 2021. So do keep an eye on the website, and you will see roles, new roles appearing on a fairly regular basis. Second part of it is through our labour desk and through our supply chain organisation. So at the moment, we're setting up our labour desk, and that's 6 agencies who will be working in partnership to source labour for a whole host of roles across the project. Latest forecast I've had yesterday is that we're potentially looking up to 3,000 blue collar roles across the project. Again, that'll be over the coming months and over the next few years as we try and reach the peak of the project. A lot of those will be those blue collar roles. So again, a lot of it will be centered around plant operatives and plant labour roles. So again, a huge number of those needed, and that's partly why we're trying to look at how we can upskill, because again, going out trying to find people off the peg with those experiences is going to be very difficult. There are other people, other projects that are quite close to us who are also looking for those types of roles. So for us, it's equally about finding people who are keen, but maybe perhaps don't have the experience and the training, and how we can support them to be suitable and able to move into those types of roles. So again, that's a really exciting piece of work that's happening at the moment, and you will definitely see more of that in the coming months. I think at the moment, having chatted to our labour manager yesterday, I think we're expecting considerable demand for things like ground workers, plant operators, as I mentioned previously, traffic marshals, and a range of logistics roles. So again, that's probably not a huge surprise on a project of this nature, but we are going to need those in some considerable numbers. So an awful lot of opportunities there, and a lot of other things besides. Really important to kind of keep you up to date with how you can find out about these things. So again, for our own roles, we'll all be advertising them on ekfb.com. We are a partner in the HS2 job brokerage system, which I know Buildforce are obviously a strategic partner in also. One of the really important things to just be mindful of is that at the moment, the HS2 job brokerage system promotes our vacancies as a tier 1 organisation, but we are working with them to make sure that those tier 2 opportunities, so again, some of those blue collar and other roles will also be mentioned on there. And the idea of the brokerage system is it's a bit of a one-stop shop for all of the HS2 roles, whether it be HS2 themselves, plus tier 1, plus tier 2 and beyond. And also, I know that some of our agencies already are starting to look at places like Total Jobs. They're starting to utilise Facebook and also LinkedIn. So again, it's really useful for you to kind of make sure you're on top of, you're registered, and you're keeping an eye on those sites as well. Because, you know, recruitment on this scale, it means a bit of an assault on every possible option in terms of advertising. So I know there is and will be considerable activity, certainly on those sites, over the coming weeks and months. Something else to think about, slightly left field also. Obviously, as a big project, we're not necessarily doing everything ourselves, and a project of this nature and this size has quite an impact on the local economy. We're appointing and have been appointing and will be appointing a huge number of supply chain organisations to provide services to us and our workforce. And so we expect that in turn potentially throws up new opportunities as well. So I've just put a list on here of some of the types of supply chain opportunities that we have been having. Some of them we are in contract and we've got providers already. Others we're still working on. But again, thinking about that sort of size of that workforce, sort of several thousand people working across an 80-kilometre stretch, that's going to create a big demand for a number of services to the workforce. And so again, when I think about things like accommodation, when I think about things like catering, when we think about site services, again, there's a huge range of opportunities through our supply chain. So again, back to that, you don't need to be an engineer to work on an engineering project. We would expect that there will be employment and training opportunities in a range of other industries as well, because simply the size of this type of project ripples out far and wide. So again, I think it's useful, again, just to keep an eye on what's happening in those areas as well for opportunities. So last one from me, in terms of how we will try to work with Buildforce to support you going forward. So again, keeping our vacancies up to date on ekfb.com. We do use LinkedIn to promote certain roles, and actually for you potentially looking to identify roles, LinkedIn's also a really good place to make connections with people within the industry as well. And I know a number of us that are very prominent in LinkedIn. We're always happy to make connections and make contact with people who are keen to connect with us. We will continue to work with HS2, as we've mentioned, on that job brokerage system, because again, I think it'll be really valuable for anyone looking to get onto the project, that you can kind of see where everything is in one place rather than necessarily have to scour through loads of different places for vacancies. And the idea of the job brokerage system is that it's all under one roof. And we will keep in contact with Buildforce, and we're always really keen to support activities, we're keen to support events and open to ideas as well. So again, if there are things that we can do to help you, please do let us know. And the last one for me is really a bit of an offer. So what I'd be keen to do for anyone who's keen to get a little bit more involved and maybe think about applying for roles, I'd be really keen to offer an application and interview technique session. One of the really interesting things I've noticed in the past year is I suppose it's become very common now to do online interviews, and it's quite daunting if you've never done one before. So the whole process of application and interview has changed considerably in the last year. So again, I'd be really keen to put on a session to help anyone who just wants to kind of get themselves up to date and maybe hasn't had an interview for a while and would benefit from some recent experience from myself and some of my colleagues. Then also linked to that, I'd be really happy also to put on a CV clinic where we can perhaps look at CVs, give some feedback from an employer's perspective in terms of how they're structured. Again, some of the key words and phrases and things to focus on. Things like the length of the CV, again, all of these things are really important. And so again, if we can add value and assist you along the way in terms of your applications, then I'd be really keen to do that. So that's an open offer, and I'm very happy to work with Angela and Caroline on that if that's of interest. And that's all from me. Back to you, Angela.
Hi there, Paddy. I was delighted to hear that. So thank you very much. We're going to have people in their droves signing up for that. So thank you again. If I could pass it to our next speaker, James Dobson. Thank you, Paddy.
Thanks.
Before I share my slides, there's really only four. A little bit about myself. I left the Army in 2014. Prior to that, I mean, I studied physics at university, commissioned into the Royal Military Police, and had quite an interesting career because specialised, even though I was an officer, in close protection. So I spent a lot of time attached to the Foreign Office, and that was really on a tour in 2012, and I was over in Afghanistan, is where I made my decision that actually in the previous sort of 7 or 8 years, I'd moved house 6 times. I was on my second operational tour in 18 months and decided, you know what, maybe it's time to have a look on the outside, because I felt some of the pressures on my personal life and some of the things in sort of my career. I was like, well, we can continue to move every year and keep fighting for promotion, or let's go and try our hand on the outside. And I decided to leave. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about my experiences and the journey that I was on from leaving the Army in 2014 all the way through to joining EKFB in July 2020. So really, for those people that are in that position of leaving at the moment, it's a journey through some of the ups and downs and some of the experiences, and also some of the lessons that I've learned along the way, that potentially things that I didn't know when I was looking at leaving the Army. So bear with me 1 second, I'll put my slides up. So hopefully you've got my slides.
Yeah, we can see them. Thank you.
Great. So what we've got here is a timeline from that moment in 2012 where I was sat there thinking, yeah, this is all fantastic, and I was loving my career, but I actually sort of got to a point of saying, what next? Do I want to continue doing this? Do I want to go on to staff college and then push and keep going for promotion, or do I look to do something on the outside, look after myself and essentially look after my family? So picture there is 2012 December. Me with my ugly mug getting crated in the background of some footage of David Cameron visiting Helmand Province. Now, that was a fantastic tour. One that I really enjoyed. I was running at the time Sir Richard Stagg's protection team out of the embassy in Kabul. and that meant that when David Cameron and visiting politicians came on, I also ran that show for them as well. So Special Branch would be attached. And in my late 20s, I had the responsibility of looking after the most senior British person in Afghanistan, and then also looking after the Prime Minister and all of his entourage, and running them around the country, getting them to where they needed to be and ensuring that they were safe. But that was the second time I've been away in 18 months. And that prompted me to think, well, maybe it's time to move on. So I applied to leave, and I started my termination leave in May 2014. And the first thing I did was coming from a background, having been in the Royal Military Police, I moved across and I became the operations director for a specialist security company. The sensible job as it is on the timeline. And after about 4 or 5 months, decided that really wasn't for me. It was consistently dealing with the same thing day in, day out. And through working on my network and somebody else that I knew, just before Christmas in 2014, I travelled out to Hong Kong. Little bit of a word of do your due diligence. So the fantastic job that I'd just taken in Hong Kong was actually looking after and training the personal security teams for a Chinese billionaire called Gao Wengi, and there's a New York Times article there. The reason why I say do your due diligence, the first job was we only found out later, was we'd actually extracted him from Hong Kong to the UK and then onto the USA, because he was actually wanted by the Chinese government. So that was an incredibly interesting and really fast-paced initial role. But what I would say is, look at what you're going to do when you do leave the army. There's a world of opportunity out there, and go and do what you really want to do, before potentially jumping feet first, which is what I did initially, into that sensible job. So go and do something that you're passionate about, and it is okay to have those moments where you go and it's quite literal in here. Oh shit, what am I doing? Because you're moving away from a career that might be 7 years, it might be 15 years, it might be 22 years, it might be a little bit later on, and the outside world is a whole big bag of unknowns. Obviously, tail end of 2014, I set my own business up. I was predominantly doing security consultancy, and I moved along, and I ended up working on another quite controversial project. I ended up as the head of business resilience, working for a company called Quadrilla Resources, and I spent just over 4 years with Quadrilla, and working with Quadrilla, working with INEOS alongside another large oil and gas company. But one of the things I learned there was really about adaptability. I joined as initially as head of security, and ended up as the head of business resilience, covering all things legal, critical logistics, and also looking at various sort of crisis mitigation, business continuity, and incident management planning for that business, before finally transitioning again when they'd finished works that required any form of sort of business resilience piece. In 2019, just before, well, mid-2019 through to early 2020, before COVID hit, I moved across to project managing plug and abandonment projects. So almost using that sort of basis of engineering knowledge and project management knowledge, A, from initially studying physics at university, and B, from a career as an army officer, who generally we are all army officers, junior NCOs, senior NCOs. We're all natural project managers. And the lessons that I learned along that sort of really varied journey before moving onto my current position and my current challenge as a senior security manager at EKFB was that focus on, we need to be adaptable, and adaptability is key, and avoid typecasting yourself into a single channel, because, I mean, for example, in my journey, and many of you that are sort of watching this, we do project management in the armed forces every single day. Every time you tie in a multi-agency operation, be that it could be organising a ceremonial event where you've also got the got a local authority involved, or you've got the police involved. So we're great stakeholder managers, and we're good at engaging and bringing people along for the journey. I ended up, given a military policing background, involved in legal and injunctive strategies, logistical planning, crisis management, security, obviously what I do now. And then on the side, I was developing properties, but the world is your oyster, and you can go and do these things, because what the armed forces do is equip you with a multitude of skills that you probably don't actually realise you have. And one of the points further on is, you sometimes, armed forces leaders don't properly communicate those skills that they have. They're not really able to translate them. And sometimes I even see CVs come across my own desk where I understand what the individual is trying to say, but often they wouldn't make it through a sift. Another piece is really your network and how you use it, how you grow it and meet people. When you leave in the armed forces, it's an opportunity really to go and meet a whole load of new people, but also catch up with people who've gone that journey before you. Meet them, have lunch with them, because most work isn't really advertised. If I even consider my team, my sort of 5 area security resilience managers and my 2 IC, most of that team, whilst they applied through an advertised position, were also brought to my attention through people that I knew through my network or through their network, because a recommendation or having a network is a really powerful ally for you in a very competitive jobs market. And then finally, back yourself and sell yourself. Don't be afraid to take risks, and make sure you sell your skills, because sometimes this is where veterans can struggle in terms of selling themselves. And then the point about translating those skills. A lot of military qualifications and experiences do need to be explained, particularly when you're applying for jobs as a civilian, because civilians might not understand that you are a project manager, or have been project managing, or you've been engaging multiple stakeholders on a multi-agency operation, or all of those sort of skills get lost in sometimes a shortening of qualifications and experiences on the CV that can get overlooked for somebody who may have done something to a lesser degree but has presented it better. Some of the graphics and some of the things on here just show that the variety of the bits and pieces that I've been involved in that go well beyond that sort of initial scope of the security brief, be they do sort of risk mapping and strategy and planning for sort of large-scale oil and gas projects, or supporting the media in developing counter-narratives. In July 2017, Quadrilla Resources had the largest environmental process that's been seen in the UK in the last sort of 25 years, solely focused on one site. And one of the challenges they were faced with was delivering a drilling rig on time to allow them to start work, and with a considerable cost associated to the fact that every day that they were being delayed was costing in the region of £250,000. So one of the challenges that I was set was go and figure out how we get those 100 trucks into a site in 3 days when there's 300 people camped outside, and we've had 96 arrests and the road's been closed 19 of 21 days. And it's those experiences in the armed forces, the ability to bring in the police, the council, the workforce, multiple logistical companies, and putting that together. Those are some of the assets that armed forces leaders really can bring to a job role, and they're the sort of things that I found that I could make a difference, but also that veterans need to sell. And then finally, my challenge now. I'm obviously the senior security manager for EKFB. I don't need to really talk about the scale of the project because Andy's done a fantastic job of that. But in essence, it's the largest site that needs securing on any project in the UK. We've got 84 kilometres of trace, so essentially 50 plus miles from top to bottom. With 129 sites, probably got 100 security officers deployed out there on a daily basis in 3 different force areas. And we've got to try and secure that whole perimeter using just those security officers, 14 mobile patrols and cameras. So we've got a pretty significant challenge ahead of us just to secure that project from traditional threats like theft and organised crime, obviously looking to steal diesel and materials, or opportunist crime, somebody going, oh, that's a whacker plate, that'd be really useful for when I do my patio, and jumping over the fence. So the traditional security challenge we face is significant. That has been exacerbated by all of the environmental activists and the protests that we talked about that used to be following oil and gas projects. Well, now they're predominantly focused on HS2. So we're also dealing with 4 protest camps in our area. And that's presenting us with a different set of challenges, because they're not necessarily here to steal all of our things. They're really focused on getting in the way and delaying and essentially costing us money. And they want to cost us money because then that makes a project like HS2 more politically challenging, particularly when the general public go, I don't see the value of this. All I see is delay and expense increasing. So really what I've got to do now is work really hard to make sure that we can mitigate a lot of those challenges, the criminality and the protest, and make sure that I can support the business and the business's continuity and try and prevent delay through working alongside and working well with not just the security teams, but also the community engagement teams that Andy spoke about, because security and community engagement almost work hand in hand. They're engaging with the general public, and we're trying to keep the site safe. But when you throw in an activism component, we're also trying to stop the project being delayed. And that project is operating in an area that not all of the public around us support what we're doing. That's really a sort of an overview of my journey and how I got to where I am at the moment. One thing that I'd like to sort of leave everybody with, and this is to the audience, that it is a journey from when you leave the armed forces, and you will have moments of doubt. If you were to look at my timeline, there was 2 moments there that said, "Oh crap!" One was the point when I was leaving, and I jumped straight into that sensible job that didn't really fulfil me. And the second one was March 2020, when I was sat there having run my own sort of consultancy business since the tail end of 2014, with no pipeline and no income, because all of the work that I had been doing in the oil and gas industry had evaporated overnight. But if you're adaptable and you back yourself, there's a whole world of opportunity out there, and this project HS2 represents a massive opportunity for service leavers, as it's going to be here for the next 20 years. And it starts with EKFB and the other people in phase 1, but it goes on and on. Thank you.
Thank you, James. That was absolutely fascinating. I really enjoyed listening to that. If I could ask Paul Bedford to join us, our poster boy, if he's there. Hi, Paul. I need to stop calling you that.
Yeah, it's fine. Yes, those that have visited the Bill Force website, it's my cheesy grin that you see first off. Those of you that may have attended the CTP brief last week will have heard me talk about my journey, and what I'm not going to do is really sort of go into that, because visit the Bill Force LinkedIn page and you'll be able to see that. What I am going to do though is talk about how I've gone full circle. I'm only going to talk very briefly, and then I'm going to hand over to somebody else. Because 3 years ago I was in your position. I was leaving the military, a bit unsure about what to do, and I'd not even considered construction. I was very much stovepiped. Let me pop a couple of slides up actually, just to get my point across. I was very much stovepiped, being an ex-ROC officer, at joining a blue chip logistics firm, Amazons or DHLs, those sort of things. But Caroline and Bill Force and Angela really helped me, and they put me in touch with EKFB. They were a Farge Care at the time, prior to bringing on 2 more partners. And I had a lot of talk whilst I was leaving the military about lots of people just find stopgap jobs until they find the thing they want to do. And I can put my hand on my heart and say I've really enjoyed my time at EKFB, and I've got no intention of leaving. That may upset a couple of people, but I genuinely have, and I found myself in a position where I want to try and give back to those people that I know were in my position a few years ago, but also support Billforce as a whole. So what I do now, having gone through the joining Billforce, I now help to mentor people. I help to give people networking opportunities, and also help develop their CVs. And from that, I found that I've been able to introduce people into careers into EKFB. And whether or not that is doing something which is logistics based, being an ex RLC officer, or indeed just networking and tying them in with other people. And it's really about what James touched upon in having those skills that you bring from the military. And we're not talking about necessarily the hard skills, because these are things that we can teach, whether or not it is learning how to operate a very complex piece of plant, or indeed learning a new trade. And I know that we have got apprentices in the business who are 30 years plus. And we've also got people who are trying new things and seeing, well, there's an opportunity here. I want to become a QS, or I want to develop my skills in the environmental team, or indeed working finance. And what that really does, it sort of paves the way for people who've got that right attitude, that right outlook, and the skills and the values that you live by in the military are really something that integrate very well into EKFB and are mirrored by the core values that the business has itself. So from that, I've been able to help people join the business, and this is where I'm now going to hand over to Dewey Duplessis, who I won't touch upon sort of what happened between he and I during his process. I'll let him do that, but it really sort of gives you a flavour of how what happens when you sign up to Billforce, get assigned a mentor, the work that could be done on your CVs and introducing to the business, and really understanding where your skills, both soft and potentially hard skills, can transfer over, like you can see on the screen now, could map over to a career in construction. So Dewey, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dewey Duplessis. So I'm the logistics manager in one of the areas called G2S, where Andy's touched on earlier. It's pretty much the top section, running all the way from Great Worth just to Southam. So it's one of the longest sections on our trace. So quite a lot involved with it, and various little things going on around the sites. As a brief overview of my career, ex-forces, so I've spent 12 years in the Marines, going over various exercises, deployments, places around the UK and the world all over. Like a lot of you on this call, probably coming up to that point where you have to decide, well, am I staying or to do the whole full term, or am I calling it a day and going into something else? I think James touched on that earlier. So came up to my 10-year point and decided, well, I am going to make the jump, and decided to get my stuff in order to leave. Luckily, for once, as an expert, Nick, sort of thought about things for once, and started to do a degree part-time through Lincoln University before I left the military. Had the support from LCAS and the military on that side. So on that part, I did my resettlement correctly. The part where it fell down for me, James touched on it as well, is the networking. I don't think I've done nearly enough networking. Not really a social media sort of person, so didn't use LinkedIn, didn't use Facebook, all that sort of those platforms. Resettlement weren't really get towards it at that point in time. It's a lot better now. So the networking side of it, I think I've had to do it all over again. It's a key critical point to try and integrate with people and get to know people. offset it to a lot of ex-forces or guys still leaving, guys and girls leaving, try and get some work experience where there just is on a weekend. At least it gives you a flavour of that job. You don't always get the real feel of a job and the real sort of what's going on a day-to-day basis if you don't do it yourself. So a bit of work experience, even if it's on your own time for free, it will do you a world of good if you can do it. Really try and push yourself towards that way. So came up to my 12-year point, and it just happened all of a sudden in one day. The last time I left the gate, and I thought to myself, same as James, oh no, what now? So I took a job with the Department of Work and Pensions, working as an assistant project manager there, for the reason of getting a steady job, wife, 2 kids, so got to have an income coming in. Really didn't enjoy it, mundane job as such, and started looking around on what other opportunities are around, and then found Buildforce. I attended one of the first Buildforce open days down in Cosford, and got in contact with Angela and Caroline, who put me in contact with Paul, and the mentoring process started from there. Me and Paul were in contact for a good nearly 6 months, bouncing CVs back and forth, just helping me to get more work experience from the Marines onto paper that actually relates to the transferable skills and opportunities and stuff out there. So that process was really valuable for me. Went to go visit EKFB down in Birmingham a few times just to see what it's all about, and they said it was still in the planning process then, but it just opened my eyes to so much more on what's going on the project and what's available. So that was the mentoring process, which still is going on. I do pick Paul's brain every now and again, and further along, feel free to get in touch with other people to just help guide and give advice. So all the guys have touched on it with the networking, the skills that we've got available, the opportunities that is available, and once you're in an industry, the industry is so diverse, and is said it as well, it's changing so much, but the core basics are still there, and especially on the job with the amount of experience on here, there's people with such a vast amount of knowledge and advice to steer you in a different direction, whether what you want to stay in the position you're in or start looking at other things, start looking at the wider picture and what's available and where you want to be going. So for my career with EKFB, started in January 2020, down in the middle section, in the Calvert section, as an assistant logistic manager. Fast learning pace, had to learn a lot, still do every day, and eventually moved on to become the logistics manager in the G2S section. The job role itself is quite varied. James, Paul, Andy, and everyone touched on that as well. It constantly changes. It's especially in the logistics sort of side of it. It's not just from getting stuff from A to B, although that is the basic point and what we're trying to do well. I think we're achieving it really well. EKFB are leading the way in a lot of aspects regarding it all, but it's trying to tie into the security, trying to tie into the construction teams, knowing where they are, what they want, when they want it, how they want it. So that community, supplier, fellow team engagement is a skill that us from the military can easily bring to a project like this. Do it on a daily basis, talking to upper or higher level managements, in whatever you do. So it's a skill that gets easily brought to us in this job. So I can go into my job role as such for quite a long time, but it got covered a lot by James's sort of aspect on it's not just security or it's not just logistics, it's trying to tie them all together. And at the end of the day, provide the construction team who are here to build the actual asset with the best support that they can possibly have. And as a final one for me, I've touched on it earlier, do get in touch with Buildforce, try and get yourself in contact with either if it's a mentoring program or a sort of work placement. Work placements are sort of opening up again now that COVID is slightly on a calmer point, but really try and liaise with people, get to know people, with whatever point of contact you've got, try and get some work experience. It's the most valuable bit of advice that from my personal point that I can give anyone. So yeah, thank you very much, Angela. That's a brief outlay of myself.
Jay, that was fantastic. Thank you very much for that. If I could ask all our speakers if they're able to switch their cameras on and join us for some questions, that would be fantastic. Listen, that was absolutely incredible. Thank you, everyone, for that. If I could, so if you do have a question, please raise your hand or type it in the box. I'll kick off for now. If I could ask Andy, our first speaker. So in a senior leader role, Andy, which is what you're doing now, what skill do you think you use the most? Which skill do you use on a daily basis?
Very good question, a very good question. And I think it's probably a skill that I should be doing every day, right? And I perhaps don't, but I think from a project manager perspective as well, when you're managing projects, I think communication is probably the most important, and listening is one of the other important things rather than talking all the time. And I think you do have this tendency to communicate and to talk, which you do, and we have. We've got a lot of challenges to communicate all our policies and procedures and our processes, and to 80 kilometres of people on the ground, but also the probably over 1,000 people that work off site, and particularly with the COVID situation now, we've got a lot of people and our designers who are go as far as India and China and things like that. So we've got a massive workforce all over the world working on our behalf. So I think communication is probably the biggest and more positive aspect, but also I would encourage people to listen as well.
And is this the best job you've ever had?
Definitely, yeah, no, definitely. I came off. I worked on Crossrail. I've worked on the East London Line and the Olympics, and this is fantastic in terms of the legacy we're going to leave. Phase one's a bit tough, I think we'll learn a lot of lessons though from this project. We'll get up to Birmingham, and then we will hopefully get some more work all the way up to Manchester and Sheffield. Yeah.
Fantastic. And if I could ask Paddy, one thing that you said, Paddy, is that you are seeking for those that are keen, may not have the experience, but will be supporting into roles. And this will be very warming for many of our ex-military community to hear that. And obviously your offer of the month, the application interview technique session and the CV clinic, most listening have already signed up. So Caroline's busy kind of booking that in for you. So thank you for that kind offer. Just one question on the CVs and the interviews. Do you suggest for EKFB that candidates should demilitarise their CV, or do you have a provision for someone ex-military to be in attendance at these interviews or to be reviewing the CVs?
That's not something I'm aware of, but it's a question I can discuss with our resourcing colleagues. I think for me, it's the presentation of transferable skills from whichever context they come from. So if they're from the military, if they're from the aviation industry, they're from the aviation industry. So I don't think for me, it's not about demilitarizing anything. I think it's about teasing out those transferable skills. And so it's how you kind of structure and phrase the CV. And often, a simple, is it a mistake? Is it an error? Is it to something to be done differently. People often pile in straight away with their experiences and their qualifications, whereas actually for me, I want to flip it the other way, and I want to get hit straight away with the profile of who they are, what their skill set is, and actually why they're going to be a really useful candidate. The rest of the stuff's context, and that comes further down for me. So I think just how you kind of flip it around, and actually those skills and experiences have come from a very valuable industry and shouldn't be hidden in any way, shape or form, in my opinion. But we can work on that in the CV sessions.
Perfect. And that's some really, really brilliant advice, Paddy, actually. So just kind of, I think somebody tends to define themselves by the courses they've attended or the degree they've got. And we're forever saying it's who you are, it's what you've got, it's the transferable skills that you possess. So it's really good to hear that. If I could ask James Dobson as well, you gave an absolutely fascinating insight to your career. And you did give assurance of that kind of, oh my goodness moment where you do need to back yourself, and that there is an opportunity, a world of opportunities out there, which was really, really great to hear. So thank you. There'll be a lot of people that will get a lot of solace from that comment, and you've walked the talk. So it's great to share that. So in terms of your current role then, James, what's most impressed you about your role on HS2?
This role on HS2 is, it would probably be the scale, if I was to really sort of simplify it. So we've all worked on some pretty big projects in the past. People who are in the military, you think you've worked on some big projects. But when you consider just how big this project is, so I worked 15 odd sites on some of the oil and gas projects I was involved, but this is absolutely massive, and there is a huge amount going on. As I sort of pointed out, 129 sites, 3 different police forces. That means there's 3 different gold commanders, 3 different silver commanders, 3 different bronze, well, more than that, probably 15 odd bronze commanders sort of firing in there. There hasn't been a project of this scale in Europe in sort of probably since the Marshall Plan at the end of the Second World War, and that's what's most impressed me about this project. I mean, even if you look at EKFB, we've broken it down into 5 projects, essentially 5 delivery areas, and each one of those delivery areas as a project in itself is probably equivalent to a lot of the civil infrastructure projects or the oil and gas projects that are going on in the UK or certainly in Europe at the moment. And it's that scale is what impresses me, and trying to keep that ticking over and trying to deliver that is fundamentally the biggest challenge that we've got, because everything that we do is bigger with more components and more considerations.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it's a simple answer to the question, but really, this is for those who are service leavers. The scale of HS2 is probably the nearest thing I can describe it to is if you went back to 2005-06 when we were in Afghanistan and Iraq at the same time. It's that kind of, there's just stuff everywhere, and trying to manage all of that. That's the big challenge.
Okay, fantastic. We've had a few questions come in. Mark Rycroft, if you're able to turn your
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Yeah, so I put a question in the comments with regards to integrating sustainable and renewable energy into the project. It's something that me and my wife are very passionate about, and it's something that I'm looking at going into when I actually leave the RAF. I would just like to ask, what sort of projects have you got that I realise that the HS2 project has been met with quite a bit of resistance from locals where the route is going through. With regards to sort of, giving back to the community like you were talking about earlier on, what sort of projects have you got in line to basically say, here you go, here's some energy that we're going to be recouping and basically giving back to the people kind of thing?
Andy, is that one you're able to pick up on?
Sorry, switch the microphone on. Yeah, I think we've got some targets through from a HS2 perspective through the whole scheme, and looking at the wider areas as well. But in relation to our works on site. You know, we talked about some of the tree planting and some of the carbon footprint, the targets we've got. We look at solar panels and solar powered, you know, cabins and cameras and various things like that. We're also, you know, from a Vodafone perspective, you know, this particular area is very much not covered by the GPS system and signals in mobile phones. So because we need it from a health safety perspective, a communication perspective, we're also in partnership with Vodafone, so putting up masts. And again, some of them masts are we need to do that in an aesthetic manner, all right, and keeping, you know, talking to the communities, but it benefits them, not necessarily saving energy, but we're considering that. I think the look and feel of some of our site compounds and things like that, again, probably not from an energy perspective, but certainly from a community perspective. Our colouring of the cabins, the colouring of batching plants, we're looking at trying to take lorries off the road. So we're utilising a lot of the railway import of stone into the sites. So again, you're not creating pollution, you're not creating more lorry movements on the road. And in the long term, it's a benefit to everybody in the local communities. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and James, have you got a point to add to that?
Just take myself off mute, just to really add to that. So my slide, we pointed out that we've got circa 800 cameras going out there. So of that, nearly 100 of those are mobile towers, but they are a mixture of solar and hydrogen gas powered. So they're really sort of cutting edge. They're the most efficient and environmentally friendly solution that we can put out there. And as Andy touched on, in terms of the legacy, we're putting a huge amount of connectivity and infrastructure out there, partnered with Vodafone, that will be left for the local communities around us. So whilst we're not building solar farms, we are putting in place some pretty big improvements for local residents in terms of their connectivity going forward long after we've left.
And there is a sustainability team within the department that we can refer Mark to, so he'll be able to find out further information from them in terms of entry routes into a sustainable role and the like. So we'll certainly connect you, Mark, but thank you for your question. Andrew, if you are there, you're more than welcome to ask.
Saying so thanks to all the presenters for the informative brief they gave, and I'm really so struck by the breadth of specialities within the logistics industry, within the infrastructure work that's going on. But my question really is, and it's to do with sort of qualifications, and I suppose it may be a question for Paddy, is noting that there's a whole breadth of skill sets required within HS2. Are there any generic type qualifications which you could sort of point us to?
Cool. That's a broad question. I guess I suppose there's two things. There's the qualifications that you need. So there are some that are sort of mandated qualifications. So in order to do certain roles, you will have to have certain qualifications or certain tickets. Those will be, you know, requirements of a role, and those will be more in the kind of technical on-site roles. Then beyond that, I guess it'll be really dependent on the area of work that you want to go into. So I think the short answer is probably no, there probably isn't. In terms of a generic, you have to have this, you have to have that. In terms of employability in general, I mean, I think in any industry, it'll be sort of things like English and maths will be fairly prerequisites. Because often if you want to go on to further training, people will look for those types of qualifications. But I think what I would probably do is turn it back around and say, well, I think what we could do is actually sit down with you and have those types of conversations based on your CV, based on your experiences, based on the types of roles you want to go into. And then what we can do is involve some of our partners on the recruitment and resourcing side, just to get a sense of what they might be looking for specifically.
Okay, so will the company actually deliver some specific training, you know, for specific roles within the organization?
Yeah, so we're putting together our training program at the moment, and I mean certainly in terms of those mandated training qualifications people need to have, that's happening anyway, because if you can't get people on the site without a certain qualification, they need to have that. In terms of professional development, thinking about their aspirations, where do you want to go? Do you want to advance in the company? Do you want to retrain, upskill? Then there is a program in place, and it's linked to people's annual appraisals and also their ongoing career progression plan. So yes, there will be a comprehensive training plan in place across the JV.
Cool. Okay. Many thanks, Paddy.
Okay.
Paul, to add to that.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add to Paddy from a service leader's perspective. I recently conducted some training within the business using my enhanced learning credits, and the business was very forward-leaning in providing me with the time off, but also helping to fund part of that as well to help develop myself as an individual to in turn be able to deliver in a more efficient manner. So there are a wide range of opportunities for training in there. It's just identifying what you need and working with the business to follow that pathway.
Great, thanks, Paul.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Paul, probably the most common question that we get asked, and I can see we've got quite a few senior candidates that have dialed in. Do you have to take a step back when you're coming into a new industry? Will construction recognise the rank and position and experience that you do have?
It's a very interesting question. I think sometimes you have to get out of the mindset of being in the military once you've left, and it's where you best fit. Within my team itself, I have people in the military who are, whilst they were in the military, they were NCOs, and they're filling roles which we've also got ex-officers also filling the same role. It's about who you are, how you can deliver. And it's not necessarily about thinking about taking a step back. It's a step across into something that's completely new. And if you've got the right attitude, you've got the skills, you will progress very quickly. Dewey has progressed very quickly already, moving into a more senior role. I've promoted as well, and I've got people again in my team who have come in from the military, who are excelling already. So try not to think of it as a step back. Think of it, if you go into a role as a manager or even as an operator or a supervisor, it's that step across, and you will be you'll quite quickly find yourself in a position which is suitable to your skills.
And do you find that the military within your team, do you feel that they thrive in team environments? Do you think when people are thinking outside the box or innovative ways to respond to problems, they're just in a completely different space?
That's a very difficult one, because there are some hugely competent people who have any military experience, and I've learned a lot from them. But equally, I like to think that they're able to take away some of the things that we give to the company. So my team is made up probably about a third ex-military. And I know for myself, I have taken from some of those who have spent their entire life in construction, excellent bits of knowledge and insights. But I'd like to think as well that some of the positive outlooks and the skills that we bring as ex-military, as service leaders, have rubbed off on them as well, and helped to develop those. And we really are the sum of all parts. And the military definitely has a place to play in construction.
Okay, and Andy, do you concur with that? Are you seeing how strong the military candidates are as they're coming in?
Oh, I definitely concur with that, and I think I've worked with a lot of ex-military people in my time, and they are generally tend to go to the logistics and security role, but certainly I don't see them as they can do any role that they need to do. I think yes, designing maybe a structural steel truss across a railway maybe is a bit more expertise in terms of a design manager, but no, I think if anybody's applying, I think because with Paul and Dewey and James have all been probably recruited by a similar person that's come from a military background, and that's the only reason why they're probably in them roles, really, to some degree. All right, they perform it really well, but I think the door is open to any of the roles that we've got. All right, and I think we do need some diversity in the teams as well, because we can learn a lot from people from an ex-military background.
That's so good to hear. And Dewey, obviously you're storming ahead in your career. What does the future look like? What position will you be holding in 2 years' time?
Well, hopefully still married, being away from home for a while, but no, thanks, Angela. No, I'm enjoying it. Like I say, where I'm at up in G2S, it's a very dynamic, fast-moving team with guys who's worked all over the world, really. There's people here who build stuff through jungles, through deserts, through everything. So tying into those people and gaining their sort of experiences and what they've done and how they've done it is really invaluable. Career progression, I'm just about to start a NVQ in construction site management using my last LCAS for that. So yeah, don't 100% know, like I say, stay employed and stay married.
And how's your fitness going, and how's your well-being going, Dewey?
It's all is very good. I think EKFB is a massive driver for the well-being and trying to promote that side of life as well. So yeah, from people from ex-military background, it's most of us are used to doing a lot of fitness and that sort of side of stuff. So fitting that into a normal new schedule of working is a bit adaptive, but it doesn't take you long to do it and find very similar like-minded people who like to go for a run and that sort of stuff after or before work. So yeah, all very good. Thank you.
All good. And James, were you running a marathon this morning?
No, not this morning. I've got to admit, I was putting my slides together this morning in classic ex-military style.
Okay. Well, listen, I can see you are all fully suited and booted. You are all melting, so I cannot thank you enough for your time this morning and for all your incredible guidance and sharing your stories as well. Thank you to all of you. I'll pass back to Caroline just to close.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. Yeah, and I'd just like to echo, that was fantastic. And it's always lovely to see some of our own on these calls, which is Aka, Paul and Dewey. And just to add to Andy's comment, much as we have placed a lot of logisticians across all the JVs, in fact, it's a common theme, we have also placed various engineers at different levels, land surveyors, lab technicians, health and safety, QSs, foreman, the list goes on, plant. So there is a place for you don't have to be an engineer and you don't have to be a logistician. There are so many roles on HS2, and as Paddy alluded to, all the JVs are really keen to upskill as well and train up for the specific roles. And on that, we are the military broker. So if you want to be connected with HS2, whichever JV you want to work with, please just get in touch and we can do that for you. And if you use the wonderful jobs platform, please do drop me an email and I will follow up with the specific JVs to make sure that your application has been processed. So normally I give the heads up to what we're doing next week, but I have to say that is a wrap. We're finished for summer. We're closed for August. So our next virtual event will be in September. We'll be focusing on the core discipline project management with alliance partners Mace and Faithful and Gould. But we also have, more excitingly, for those of you out there listening to this afterwards as well, we have our Armed Forces Insight Day face-to-face, hosted by Amy at RAF Cosford on the 15th of September. These events are excellent forums to engage with our employers across the sector. We'll have about 30 key employers in the room. So it's a fantastic opportunity to explore the sector more if you don't know much about it, because the technical knowledge in that room is immense. And also it's an excellent employment forum. So get yourself booked in, don't miss out. And if I'm not working with you and I don't speak to you, have a wonderful summer. And that's it. That's a wrap. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.